Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays, however you observe or you don't observe. This is Sell Like a CPCU. I'm joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Precious. How are you doing today, Precious?
I am fantastic. It's good to be back. Good to be here. Look, and whatever you celebrate, happy end of 2020. How about
Yeah.
that? That's a whole new reason. If you never celebrated anything before, it is a joyous occasion.
I'm looking around to see if I have like some sage that I can light on fire and just kind of like, stage the episode here. Yes, completely on board with all of that. And so anyone who is not familiar with this broadcast or this episode, this production, this is a production of the CPCU Agents and Brokers Interest Group. We are Sell Like a CPCU. We come at you every single Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Remember, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recorded version, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, get this out there to any sales professionals, especially CPCUs that you think you could use it. And always a reminder that we take questions and comments real time while we are in the midst of filming this. So if you have anything you would like to share with us or our guest, make sure to have your voice heard and put your comments and questions into the feed of the social media channel that you're watching this on. So without further ado, wow, I have to take like a deep breath after that.
You do so well.
Without further ado, I want to introduce our special guest for this episode, Meg McKeen. Megs, how's it going?
It's going great. It's
Awesome.
going great. It's great to be here in this space with you and with Precious. What important, magical work you're doing. This is great, and I'm thrilled to be part of it.
Thank you so
awesome.
much. This is a real treat, guys. I'm super excited.
So anyone who didn't read the title or the show notes or anything like that ahead of time, what we really wanted to talk to Meg about was really kind of like sales pros, like finding their niche, right? Like finding their direction, what they're going to like, hunt and gather specifically and kind of target. And there's all kinds of other stuff that we could explore as far as that topic goes. I think really quickly for anyone who's not familiar with you, Meg, just kind of give us a little elevator pitch. Like, who are you and what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, this is year 21 for me in the industry. So many of us started out by accident. I am the same. We all share that in common. Many of us do. 3 years ago, I took a sharp left turn. I quit my last job, which was at an agency, and I took a year off. And it was in that year of self-discovery and naps and amazing self-care that I really realized that what I'd been resisting in the industry was exactly what I could be part of solving. And that is really changing the conversation we have around selling insurance and changing the way we sell insurance. There's a new buyer out there, and that invites new language and new energy and new feelings to the conversation. The work we do is still as important as it always has been, but it's time for change. And 21 years in, I'm proud to have founded my own consulting firm, to be working with salespeople to help them find their voice, leverage their voice, find the clients who will value them in the sales process and beyond. And it's really powerful, really cool to be here with you to talk about it.
Awesome. How do I get that? I guess I have to have something in my life happen that gives me the impetus to take a year of self-care. I'm looking for that.
Yeah, right. It's a lot of things, and it's something I talk very publicly about. So feel free to dig through the internet archives if you want to spend an hour listening to me tell the whole story. You can find that. I'm very open about it because I think as we think about insurance careers, we need to be really thoughtful that we will unlikely be in the same job working for the same company for 30 to 40 years, like our ancestors in the industry did, right? We are just different. The energy is different around the industry and who we are as human beings. The gig economy wasn't a thing when a lot of the people who are soon to be retiring were starting out in their careers. So careers look very different now. And so I'm in that sort of in between. There's a term xennial. So I'm 42, full disclosure, not a millennial, right? Not a millennial, not a Gen Xer. So it's this sort of like, I didn't grow up with technology, but technology was part of every job that I ever had. So I relate differently to the work and still have that sense of curiosity and wandering and never being satisfied that tends to be tied to the millennial generation. So I'm right in this sort of middle sweet spot. As you all know, working in our industry can be very lucrative. There's opportunities. Even if you're just average, you'll get promoted. You'll get a 4% raise. You don't have to be great in many cases. I'm not happy about that. I like to think I'm above average, but the reality is we love bodies, and we take a lot of different bodies and qualities and characteristics in our industry. There's a place for everyone, largely. But I was feeling very out of place, very out of alignment. My background's in the social sciences. I love people. I love relationships. I love the deep work. And I felt like I wasn't really honoring what makes me unique and great and different. I was just doing a job. I was showing up. My personal life had taken a turn. I was single, not 20 and single, but, pushing 40 and single. And I was like, started to daydream, like what else could be out there? Did it mean leaving the industry altogether in order to find what I was craving? Would it mean a total departure, or could I just take a year, take a deep breath, take some naps, travel, basically take a year of retirement in the middle of my career, which is exactly what I did. And it was wonderful. And I get it. I am so fortunate to be where I am without children, without dependents, people that are relying on me for their financial futures, that I could do it. And it's very unusual, right? Yeah. I get it. But I'm very grateful. And it's allowed me to land in the position that I'm in, which is exactly what it took me 21 years to figure out.
Yeah.
So,
well, my first question for you is there any way for you to write me like a prescription or a doctor's note for my business partner and my wife to allow me to take a year off? Is that possible?
Yeah, I know, right? And no, I can't. And here's the thing. So this interview today is, Heather, I love the comments coming in. This is great. It's a moment in time because my business is still growing. I'm hustling, right? I'm out there. I'm in business development mode. I'm creating a brand and creating a voice, and I'm working really hard. It won't always be like this, right? I have grand plans for myself that this will grow and it will scale. And so therefore, the prescription, this is a moment in time, right? And 10 years from now, my job, my business, my career will look different again. And so maybe for you, it's not today. And I know what you're saying is tongue in cheek, but maybe it's 10 years from now, right? That you can find the space, and maybe you never do because you found the fulfillment in your day to day. I know a lot of people though in our industry, because that's what I know, who are struggling right now with alignment between how they show up in the world personally, but also show up professionally. And I just don't think it's something that we can ignore as an industry and continue to attract the best talent from top to bottom.
Yeah. Precious, I mean, you have kind of a similar setup to me in that it's like, the significant other and the kids and the home life and stuff. Have you ever had a moment where you kind of had a realignment, or you had or is it kind of like an ongoing process for you, Precious?
Yeah, listening to Meg talk reminds me of that movie from a couple years ago, Eat, Love, Pray, where she was able to just take this sabbatical, this hiatus, and go, and kind of rediscover. To your point, it's kind of like when NASA's planning a launch, everything has to align for those sort of things to be possible, to kind of break through the stratosphere. In a world where age-wise, I'm 41, so we're there, right? And Heather's checking in with, the generational check-in for us here. Beyond that, like you said, the family, the young children. So, I have the great blessing of a high school senior and a first grader. So I don't know that I can go off the grid without them putting out an APB. I don't think
right?
that's going to be possible. But to your point, I love the ability to take a step back and look at our industry and make a decision on where do I fit, because we're most of us, especially CPCUs and insurance professionals who have been in this ecosystem for a while, we recognize that sometimes the things that you have the experience in don't necessarily align with what you have the passion to do. And so while you may be really effective and efficient in that one role, does that truly tap into all the potential that you have and how you want to contribute to this orchestra? Because there's a ton of music playing, there's lots of instruments, and to limit yourself just because that's what we've always done is the tendency, and so to really think that through and say, first of all, I'm a professional. Then I'm an insurance professional. So how do I take this suite of experience and ability, and how do I contribute most meaningfully to what's out there? And then how do I show others how to go through that same mental process? So while no, I don't have the ability to take a year off, I've pivoted, multiple times. And each time I do, I fall in love again. I rediscover a different area that perhaps I'd overlooked or maybe shied away from. Imagine that, eating all the veggies on your plate and saying, hey, you know what? I just discovered my new favorite thing. And going back for seconds and saying, hey, this is who I am. This is how I identify. And this is my personal brand. This is what I want my name to be synonymous with.
Yeah. I can say from personal experience, I've never really taken a sabbatical. I did have a moment in my life where I went through the end of a relationship, and it was much earlier on. I lucked out and I got my mistake out of the way early. And that I think helped in a lot because I was immature before that happened. So that helped as part of my maturing process right after college. But I think I'm one of those people that I will hyper focus on something and just eat, sleep, and breathe it for a period of time. And then I will go into a period of time where I am detached from most things. And while it might not necessarily be like a sabbatical, that detachment, while other people would be like, look, you're the last month you've kind of been off. And I'd be like, yeah, well, for the last 11 months, I haven't taken a vacation and I've worked 60, 70 hour weeks. So for a month, I'll just kind of be a space cadet. And during that month, so much happens. What's funny when you're talking about that, Meg, I was like, I've never really taken kind of a year of self-care and stuff like that. But I'm one of those people that if you catch me at the wrong moment, you think I'm crazy because I talk to myself out loud, right? I work stuff out in my head, but I also have to audibilize it sometimes. And so in the car, it happens all the time. The good thing is now there's Bluetooth, talk about being a millennial. Before you were talking in the car and no one was there, be like, wow, I gotta drive away from this guy. But now they can just think I'm a phone call or something. But that's really kind of how I hash through my stuff is I seriously, I will talk it out loud. Right. And that also helps. I don't know, depending on what people's, belief structures or thought systems are, but that whole idea of speaking it into existence or kind of putting the positive energy out there so that it ends up materializing. I think that's kind of my way of doing that without really kind of going through that background mental work. But getting back to you, Meg, in terms of your journey. So it sounds like a lot of that led you down this path of, let me help others kind of at least facilitate their ability to kind of do this and reach a place where maybe before they were just kind of checked out and, doing the same old every single day, thinking that that's all there was. And they were stuck in the fishbowl and you're like, no, there's this whole ocean out here. Let's kind of help you explore. Am I characterizing that correctly?
You are. And you've just covered so much. And I think the similarity, though your story and Precious' story and mine are very different, the link is having the awareness of self that something needed to change. How that manifests for me, it was taking a year off, creating physical space, creating time, an energy shift, opening up new thought, all of that. That was my approach. But your approach could be a month of checking out mentally while you're still making the omelet for breakfast, right? There isn't a prescription, to your point, to do this. I just love when I see high potential people in our industry say, whoa, I am not a robot. I am not a machine. I am a human being, and I am better when I can leverage both my insurance expertise, but also my human expertise. What makes
Absolutely.
that individual great? That's where the proverbial magic happens when they are client facing, and client facing could be any client, any stakeholder. What's interesting in my work is that I get paid because I'm a business coach for producers, right? That's my lifeblood. But I can't ignore the journey that I'm on professionally, and how the more I talk about that journey, it invites a bigger conversation with so many other people that are in a similar place, right? And the journey is the same, whether you're a producer trying to write more business, which is ultimately the goal. You want to do it in a way where you're marrying how you show up personally and how you show up professionally. It's the same as an underwriter. It's the same as someone in leadership. It's the same as a claims adjuster. It's more of this mindset shift that we're having as human beings with this collective experience, no more obvious than the last 9 months. And I'll just drop it there, right? But like, we are craving empathy. We are craving connection. We are thriving in vulnerability. And yet, traditionally in the insurance industry, you leave that at the door. And I was never comfortable to leave it at the door. And I was never my best when I left it at the door. And I struggled to find an environment, a culture where I could show up authentically as myself, do what makes me great in a way that makes other people great, and get paid for it. And so I created it myself, frankly. It wasn't that I couldn't have found another job. I just realized, like, I think there's something here, and not just because I'm ruined for working in corporate America ever again, but because I think, again, we got to reevaluate how we contribute to the industry. Not everyone's cut out for a 9 to 5, right? With all that goes with it. So, there's so many layers to this, and I'm still today scratching the surface. Who knows how this story ends, right? But
you mentioned something that's interesting is being a sales professional in the insurance industry, because so many people, like you said, check their personality at the door. And in the past, they were almost like, strong-armed into being like automatons or robots, right? Like, be emotionless, be cold, like, let's professional, and everything like this. Being a sales professional, it's like being a rock star, because like, even if you just show a little bit of personality, you're the unique little toy, as opposed to everyone else who they're trying to make cookie cutter and try and fit into the mold and everything like that. And I always found that appealing, because I'm one of those people who's like, here's a line in the sand, and I'm like, oh well, I'll just put my foot over the edge of that line a little bit. I've always been that person, but I think that is changing. It's changing because of people like you, Meg. I think there's also, like you said, there's a new consumer aspect of this. Do you felt that undercurrent, right, Precious? I mean, like, Precious, you've held more positions than I have within the insurance industry. So, I mean, did you feel that undercurrent as you were going through your professional kind of like progression?
So I'm going to take that in the positive light.
Yes.
Not that you're accusing me of being a job hopper here at this point, but no, I kid. I get what you're saying. I completely agree. I think that, this whole concept and even a visual of what an insurance professional looks like is changing in a good way, and so I joke about being kind of the unorthodox, not your typical insurance leader. When I go into trainings and meetings and things like that, there's got to be a degree of relatability,
right,
to be human, to be vulnerable. And that kind of leads back to that branding, to figure out where your warmest market is and where you have the greatest ability to, connect. So I've been in roles where, I worked exclusively with like professional and nonprofit, and so in those verticals, there's typically a lot of depth, right? You have a gatekeeper, you have a decision maker, you have a board, and so you kind of have to swim upstream a little bit. That's kind of a longer sail, things like that. And I've also been on the flip side where I am now, where I specialize in transportation, where these are owner operators, these are micro businesses, these are, very oftentimes the person that you're talking to, they're the one behind the wheel, literally. They're driving the truck. And so trying to weigh, the pros and cons, like I will tell you, for example, back when I was in claims, so I kind of had the opportunity to run the bases, if you will. Spent some time in underwriting, spent some time in claims, came back home to sales because that's where I felt I had the greatest impact, right? Because I enjoyed the consultative piece of it, having saw what losses look like, understanding what applications look like, to be able to give that advice to the client that this is what the insurance experience is going to, feel like. And so when I was in claims, one of the things that I encountered, and again, this was my personal experience, is that auto claims were more difficult for women. Because oftentimes we got met with the, what do you possibly know about a car? You're a girl, And so after tiring of that, right, I'm like, okay, really every other call is going to be about, my gender versus my ability or my knowledge. I made the decision to move, to a different, piece of claims. And so we run across this friction sometimes, when we're trying to fit into spaces that, for whatever reason, we can continue, and there's those that do, to normalize things and to push in an area until the acceptance, becomes greater. Or you can choose to take your toys and go to another playground, which is what, I decided to do. And so that's the thing that I enjoy most about the diversity of roles within insurance, because to Meg's point, it takes all of us. Because we have such a diverse group of people who need that expertise and the professionalism that we bring. And so I just learned how to pursue different pastures. I do want to say one thing, because I saw some of the comments, and I appreciate you guys. So I have been offline for the past couple of weeks. And to Meg's point, self-care is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And so about 2.5 weeks ago, Saturday morning, just like any other, I woke up to the left side of my face being paralyzed. Rushed to the emergency room. At that point, we weren't sure exactly what happened. Needed to rule out things like a stroke, something more severe. The diagnosis was Bell's palsy. And so that meant that the activities that we take for granted, chewing, speaking, smiling, all of a sudden became, for the first week, impossible and then challenging, right? And so I'm calling out the obvious. This is why I'm not on camera today. I'm still healing. I'm very grateful that I am progressing. So I'm able to speak for the most part right now without too many slurred words. But circling back, the cause of it, as far as the doctors could advise, is stress. Oftentimes, especially depending on the role that you have in your organization, in your household or whatever, we tend to take things on and feel like we are the pillar that holds the sun in the sky,
Yep.
And so, life is stressful. 2020 has been stressful. But one of the things that I'm most appreciative of is that because of my experience, because of my training, I am able to work in an industry that, first of all, allows for telework. That's something that all industries haven't been as open to, and things haven't been as possible. I'd recently shared some statistics about how minority communities specifically are least likely to be engaged in telework right now in the middle of this pandemic. And so supporting others in this industry who may not already be here, to encourage them to come on board, is a huge passion of mine. So thank you, Matt. So yes, lots of practice, because what do you do when your go-to skill fails you? And so literally my ability to be on camera and on a microphone, I came to a sharp halt here for about 2 weeks. But again, super appreciative to have connections, opportunities, and to be positioned. So when even life derails things, I'm still on track. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kind of go on my, but I did want to acknowledge so many wonderful people who noted my absence and missed me. And I missed you guys too. And again, this particular episode is super special because, Meg and I have connected previously, and, what you're doing for industry professionals to help them even go through that mental process. the concept that you don't have to do what you've always done. And if you could just close your eyes and visualize, what does success mean to you aside from your take-home pay? So if pay wasn't an issue, if titles weren't an issue, what is that activity within our space that you can do and lose all track of time? You know, because that's where you find your passion. And if you can figure out where your passion intersects with your profits, that is a great space to be.
Very.
So in terms of your consulting, Meg, what is kind of the first steps, if you will, when you're talking to industry professionals, and what are some starting steps as far as advice on how to even get in the mindset of having this conversation?
Yeah. So hold on. We're going to pause for a second, Miss Precious. What you just shared is intensely personal, and it's more important than anything that we're going to talk about today or ever about selling more insurance, right? So I'm glad you're on the other side of this. I'm glad you're doing what you need to do. There's so much pressure to show up. There's so much pressure to be perfect and have it all figured out. And I'm glad that you're here, and you're here in a way that feels good and authentic to you. And you are such a light. So thank you for sharing. The more we share, the more connected we feel, the more human we feel, the more it's okay for other people to share and show up. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. As far as the consulting work I do, I am not for everyone. I have sat through hours and hours and days of insurance sales trainings that are as effective, perhaps more effective than anything that I will ever spew out into the universe. It's all about fit and expectations. My approach is very different. I do not have a system. I will not tell you how to 10x your business overnight. That's just not the business that I'm in. It's out there. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's just not my style. And frankly, having sat through all of those trainings, walking away with a nugget or two, like there's good stuff in there, but mostly feeling like I would never do those things. I would never use those scripts. That language is so inauthentic to me that I found it just less effective than maybe what else could be out there. So what we do, it's very, very much a coaching model, and it depends very much on what the individual client needs. We'll talk in sort of stereotypes here. Most of my clients are in their first 3 years of sales. They have a baseline book of business, a baseline knowledge, but there's some sort of frustration. And often it's between what they think they should be doing and where they should be and where they actually are. So one of the most important things I like to remind people is that your sales manager or your boss might want you to bring in $100,000 of revenue in the first 6 months. However, it takes 2 to 3 years for most agents to hit their stride. I've been doing this for 21 years. I was a field underwriter for a long, long time. So I worked very closely with agents just starting out. I saw the ones that made it. I saw the ones that bailed, and then I saw the ones that got escorted to the door because they probably were a bad hire to begin with. There's no way to speed up the process. There are tricks and there are tips and there are hacks, but this is as much a mental exercise as it is, are you making your cold calls? Are you pounding the pavement? Are you doing all the things? It's tough. Selling insurance is hard. And I'm not saying that because I want to discourage people. It's just fundamentally hard. We're selling something you can't see. It's loaded with fear. It's loaded with uncertainty. What do we do when we're afraid and uncertain? We don't open up our checkbooks and say, I want to buy more insurance, right? This is human behavior stuff here. This isn't rocket science. So the problem that I see and the problem I solve is if selling insurance from no one knowing your name to someone being ready to sign on the dotted line is a scale of 1 to 10. Most salespeople start the conversation at step 7. We skip 1 through 6. Why? Because 1 through 6 are the things that you can't really see happening. It's the showing up on LinkedIn. It's creating some sort of engagement with your network. It's talking to your COI, your centers of influence. I hate jargon and I just did it. It's all of those things that we don't get to see immediate results for. And so we just skip them. That's the 2 to 3 years that I'm talking about. And we just skip them. And so we start at level 6 or level 7 or step 6 or 7. And then people are like, what are you talking about? I don't know you. I don't like you. I don't trust you. And we know like and trust is a huge thing in insurance sales and in sales in general,
Absolutely.
right? And then we want them to buy insurance, and then we're mad when they don't. And then what we forget is that what we bring to the table, the energy, the language, the way we show up is as important as that proposal on the table. But we forget all that. That's 1 to 6. We don't want to do it. It's hard work. Where I come in as a coach is to know where you are, know where you need help. Accountability is a huge part of what I do. We're so much more likely to keep the promises that we make to someone else than the ones that we make to ourselves. And so I'm there. I'm there to help get you to the next step. When there's that empty white space and you're not sure what you should be doing or could be doing, to energize, to create some new ideas, and then also to validate that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. There's nobody else that has it figured out either. We're just figuring it out as we go, and having a safe space, which is what I create. And if I can be so bold as to say that's my gift, is the ability to create this sense of connection quickly and intimately. And in a space like that, we talk about all sorts of things. It's as much personal development as it is professional. It's challenging coworkers, an account manager who won't help, a boss who won't listen, a client who's really mean. All the things comes out in our sessions. And to go back to my very original comment, this is exactly where I am meant to be. So when people meet me and they hop on their free introductory call, they know quickly if I am for them or not. Because I don't have one system over here that I'm selling to John because John's ready to buy, and then another one over here for Mary because Mary seems to want a little more of the touchy-feely stuff. I just don't. I'm either for you or I'm not. And either way, we're all going to be great, right? That was a lot. How I enjoy this a little bit, like that I'm a little bit.
That is
perfect. Here.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll just turn out the lights. You just keep going. And no surprise that I host a podcast as well, because I love this stuff, right? Like the fact that we can have these conversations and be candid and be open. I just think this is the progress that we're talking about, right? Well, and I think something that we talked about before we went live really kind of applies here, and it applies to the individual producer, and it applies to the agency and the agency principal as well. It's this idea of self-awareness, right? Like what your skill set is, what you're good at, what you're maybe not that great at, and either need some work, or even if you're one of those people that would rather double down on your strengths and, hire people to fill in where you're weak, you have to kind of do all of that analysis. And it needs to be both on the individual producer level, and it needs to be especially on the agency level. So like what you were talking about with like call scripts and stuff like that, if you're an agency that wants to be a relationship-based agency, I don't understand why you should be like really heavy into call scripts, because call scripts are just a recipe for like turn and burn factory style production, right? That's McDonald's. That's not like your corner mom and pop restaurant that wants you to come in all, knows your name and knows your favorite order. And like, they're completely different worlds. This might be a loaded question. I don't want you to out your clients. Okay. But yeah. I mean, do you think in general that agency owners and principals have a high level of self-awareness, or do you think that that's somewhere that they can use a lot of work?
Well, I rely on them to pay me, so I'll be gentle. It's a problem, right? It's a problem. Expectations and reality are very different, and the pathway to success isn't always a straight line for a producer. And producers who are growing books of business, who didn't start out on day one being gifted, a book from someone who's retiring, or, the 6-figure revenue account that, their father happens to be the CFO, or like whatever, because that happens, right? And those people by definition are successful. There's a lack of understanding that in the beginning, it's clumsy and it's awkward. And it's as much getting out in front of people and sharing your message and dropping off your business cards in the fishbowl to win the free lunch, as it is deep breath. I can do this. I'm okay. It's supposed to be hard. My confidence is in the you know what, and I got to get up and do it again tomorrow. And maybe I'm not cut out for this. As sales managers, as agency principals, we want to focus on the easy part. And that's the activity. What are you doing? Are you out? Are you making your calls? What's in your pipeline? How many deals are you closing? In this one I love, when are you going to close that deal? As though the producer has any control over when a client makes a buying decision. That's the one I like, baffles me as a professional in the industry.
5 p.m. on Thursday. That's when I'm going to close it.
So
don't
I'm
even mind
feeling
it.
attacked.
Don't even worry that there's a renewal date, which is 90% of when they close, right? But anyway, that's going to be what it's going to be. And we're not, my goal, my mission is not to un or rewire the human psyche. But often I can tell very early on if a producer will be successful based on the environment, based on the level of support, the realistic expectations, and part of the onboarding process, the interview that they're doing of me, but that I'm doing right back, is how do you pay your producers? How do you measure success? Is it dollars? Is it behavior? Are you because I can't fix a bad hire, right? If you got really excited because your buddy's son just graduated from college and he was a really good lacrosse player and he needs a job, he might be the best insurance agent that's ever made it through the industry. But I can't make him what he's not. I'm not a magician. I mean, and I do what I do because I want people to be successful, right? I think there's another way to get where we want to go. And it doesn't have to be the way that our uncles and grandfathers and the guy with the Rolls Royce down the street did it, right? I think, and I'll say this editorially because I can't help myself. Give me a microphone and I can't shut up. I have a special interest and affection for helping women in sales. And I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. There are more of us licensed in the industry than our male counterparts, but very few of us on the front line selling insurance to support ourselves and our families. Absolutely. And I don't think there is any reason why that has to continue to be the case. And so super passionate about that.
This is anecdotal. And I would love to hear Precious and your Meg, your opinion on this. I've seen far fewer clients have buyer's remorse about buying policies from female agents and CSRs. And I don't know if that's anecdotal, but it just seems that there's more of a, like you were talking about, like steps 1 through 6, right? The agents I've talked to that aren't having big problems during COVID or haven't had to completely change their business model, they were doing steps 1 through 6 so that when COVID happened, they were still writing, right? Yep. Because they knew like those first 6 steps that they weren't generating revenue on, it created a pipeline, it created a brand, it created whatever buzzword you want to use for it. But one thing I've noticed is that with any of either the direct people that have worked for me or people that I've worked alongside that I consider my peers, the women that sell, I typically find that those policies stay the longest. The owner isn't sitting there questioning every dime afterward. I mean, sometimes they do, but not nearly as frequently with the male counterpart that is just going for the throat. Like, just get them to sign on the line, pay the invoice, and then move to the next thing. I could be off base. I would love to hear you guys' opinion on that one.
So I will say that from a, again, it's all about the approach, right? And so in my environment, in commercial sales, we go into the conversation, again, very consultative. We want to do a risk analysis. We want to talk about what makes you unique as a company. Oftentimes when we get into risk management, this is also where I'm introducing to them this whole concept of speculative risks, right? So insurance, we tend to focus on preparing for what's going to go poorly, but what happens if you grow? What happens when you succeed? You have to be prepared for the upside as much as you are for the downside, and so this is intentional, right? Because I'm trying to build endorphins here, some warm fuzzies. I'm trying to get them thinking about when things go well, not the scare tactic of when it all crashes and burns, right?
Yeah.
And so when we kind of go through these scenarios and we talk about where you are today, where you plan to be tomorrow, why it's super important to customize something that's going to really work for where you are and what makes you unique, it's that relationship building. And so one of the things that surprises people, I think, for example, when I hire, is that I'm a huge believer that sales acumen transcends industries. If you understand how to connect with people, if you understand how to read buying cues, if you understand, how to leverage a conversation where you have these set of open-ended questions, these set of closed-ended questions, that you're guiding this conversation, because the crescendo, right, is really going to happen not when I tell the customer what I want them to buy, but when I have that customer that dips into that self-realization that, wow, I've got a lot to lose. Then I get to deliver this magic cure. Like, I've got great news. You can sleep better at night because those exposures that you've just agreed now that you have, I have a solution in case those things happen. And so I think that the nurturer comes out, right? The problem solver. But if you don't execute on this well, it can fall flat. So to your point, from a persistency standpoint, if the sale conversation is done right and the customer has buy-in that what you're doing isn't just to fatten your pocket and get a bigger commission, but it's truly customer focused, then they'll hesitate less. They're not going to hang up and then call the service center behind you and cancel what I just wrote, Yeah. So to Meg's point, I think oftentimes what happens, even within our industry, I'll say especially within our industry, is we still have this concept of the producer being the guys in the field and that the ladies are the girls in the office, right? And so they're out there hunting and then they bring it back and we're the ones that clean it up and cook it, right? And so sometimes it's viewed as being it is a male-dominated industry, still very much so. I don't want to say that being a great salesperson is not feminine, but it's just not typical, which is ironic because if we learn how to marry, it doesn't have to be aggressive, right? It doesn't have to be a hard close. I get that all the time. Oh, I just, I don't know. I'm not really great at like asking for the sale or like, getting them to sign the dotted line because I feel like that's too much, like that's over the top, right? They can lead them all the way but there. What I tell them on the flip side, to look, circling back to the when are they going to bind, I ask the question right out the gate. So we're going to jump into this process. We're going to do all of these things. If I can deliver on A, B, and C, will you be ready to do D? Let's just go ahead and talk about that now, because otherwise let's just be respectful of one another's time. So can I get a soft commitment up front that if these are the things you want me to deliver on, once I've done my end, you'll be ready to do your end. And that way I know who is a now and who is a later and who is a never. And we're just setting expectations, right? And so when I come back around and say, hey, I've got fantastic news. You wanted A, B, and C. Please see A, B, and C. So now with D, how do you want to do that, right? So there's ways that women can incorporate some of these strategies. But to your point, Matt, we do have to approach it differently. And depending, again, back on what vertical and where you are, because sometimes it's viewed as there's this tightrope that we have to walk, because if we're too pushy, then there's a letter in the alphabet that gets thrown out there. If we're too wish-washy, then we're not confident enough and we're not suited for the role. And so trying to be cognizant of all these different things happening around you and still stick the landing, it's a challenge, but it's also one of those skills that once you realize that I don't have to be the next Matthew Struck, I can do it my way and still be really great at it. And so, that's the passion that I share with Meg, is kind of taking these things that I have done well over the years and helping people adapt it to feel natural, make it your own. And like I said, show up fully and authentically instead of putting on this mask and trying to go through the motions that somebody else did.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Meg?
I have so many. And I I'm so grateful to both of you, frankly, for being on this journey with you, because I think individually we all have a collective mission, and that is to change what it feels like and what it looks like to sell insurance. And we're all doing that in our own way. And there is absolutely enough to go around. And I'm an agent, by the way. I don't talk about that super publicly. Here we are. But I have a book of business, and everything that I talk about with my coaching clients are things that I absolutely do in my own business. And it's been an evolution to craft a book of
Yeah. I want to say thank you, because there are so many paper consultants out there that are giving best practices, and you're like, have you ever sold? Like, have you ever run a book of business? And they don't really have anything behind them. So I'm sorry I cut you off, but like, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
And thank you for recognizing that as a consultant, as a person who has hung her self out there as a sales coach, right? I think a lot about credentials. Have I been at it long enough? Is my book big enough, for me to stand in the front of the room, whatever that looks like now, and claim to have this expertise? The answer to that is yes. That's my imposter syndrome, loud and clear.
Mm-hmm.
Because to your point, I've sat in the room with 40-year sales trainers who haven't sold anything in 40 years. Now they're developing their business, and that is sales. To your point, Precious, business development is happening, whether we're selling ourselves, our brand, our product, it's insurance, it's cars, it's shoes, it's whatever. A lot of sales is happening as we navigate the world. But that is something that I take very seriously and to heart, and is very intentional for me as a business owner. It's important to me to be at the front of the line, to understand what's going on in our industry, what's going on from a technology, from a mindset, from a distribution, from a product standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, it makes the coaching calls that we do a whole lot more fun, because we're choosing markets. We're talking about, for new producers who have never gone out to a manufacturing plant and don't want to show their cards to the client, that they have zero idea what's happening in a plastics plant. Because I have an underwriting background, I can say, like, let's talk about these 5 things, and automatically your credibility is going to go way up. That is gold to a new producer, right? And so I'm not foolish. I know what I have, right? I know the arrows in my quiver. I know the tools in my tool belt, and I'm leveraging them every day in the work that I'm doing. And to bring this back around and to get off the feeding my ego trip that I apparently was just on, as I think back about what I just said, there are, just like my clients self-select when they work with me, they know if I'm for me or not. We do that as sales professionals too. So my book of business is largely woman-owned, growing small businesses. And we can have a whole other conversation about building a book of business full of small business. That's a whole other conversation. But for me, not a darn thing is scripted about what I do, because guess who's a woman building her own small business? Hello. So when you talk about a niche, we're way overthinking it most of the time. And we talk about niche. I want to work with manufacturers. I want to work with construction. I want to work with nonprofits. And all of that is very valid. And it also represents sort of the insurance of old, right? My niche, because I can go to a conference, I can go to the National Home Builders Association conference, and I can stand there as the insurance agent that handles home builders. I would argue, do you like home builders? Do you care about home builders?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When the mold crisis erupted many years ago, and every home builder was out of business or freaking out about their liability insurance, do you want to enter that fray? Or is that where you want to be? Is that where you're at your best? I would say, can we think about stage of business? I love working with startups. Why? There's no competition. They don't know how the game is played because no one's told them there's a game to play.
Absolutely.
My clients come to me because they are personally and financially invested in their business, and they believe in it and they care about it with a depth that I'm totally stereotyping, but someone who's hired in at the CFO level with 30 years of experience somewhere else is now in charge of procuring insurance And he's likely more concerned about the bottom line. Is the bottom line always part of the conversation? Absolutely. We would be foolish to think that anyone is not going to take price into consideration. But when I'm working with my insurance clients and my sleeves are rolled up, they value me. They value the fact that I've been doing what I've been doing for 20 years. And just like they're experts at the thing they're building, I'm an expert about this one too. And the fact that I have an entirely different business that outside of selling insurance lends a whole nother level of credibility, because they know at the end of the conversation, when I say I move at your pace, which I think is one of the most powerful things we can say as salespeople, I move at your pace, and I set really clear expectations about what's going to happen next and what's going to happen next. And I'm not going to follow up with them every 2 days and ask them if they've made a decision. They know exactly where to find me. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful. It de-emphasizes the sale, right? People know as insurance agents, we're going to try to sell them something. That's how we get paid. I don't like it, but that's how we get paid, right? I don't like that there's a commission attached to the product we sell. It's too important and too valuable, but that's how the industry is structured largely, right? So people aren't stupid, obviously. And it's up to us. We're not going to change psychology, right? But we can change how we show up. We can be transparent and disclose and start at level 1 instead of level 7 and create that gross, uncomfortable environment.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to unpack there. My first thought process is almost like I have to bite my tongue, because like the phrase "how dare you" comes to mind. But if you want to be a construction real estate, a construction risk manager, or like a construction insurance agent, and you've never hit a nail with a hammer, like who the hell are you? Like what are you doing, right? Like my question, whether a new potential producer that I talk to, or any producers that I talk to that might want to like link up or something, the questions I'm asking them about like their niche and stuff is, they're like, well, they fall into exactly the same kind of thought process that you laid out, Meg. It's like, oh, well, there's a lot of warehouses, and warehouses need insurance, and it's very lucrative. And you're like, have you ever been in a warehouse? Like, it's dusty in there, right? Like you're wearing the Brooks Brothers suit, you're going to get dirty, right? Like there's a level of, again, it comes back to, I could share Heather's comment all day long. There's a level of authenticity and self-awareness that needs to be in there. The other thing that you mentioned was the concept of like, if you don't know, okay, don't act like you know, or don't go completely unprepared. Use your network around you and people like you, or underwriters that you work closely with, or the loss control department at carriers. Pick their brain. If you're walking into a manufacturing risk and you've never written one before, you need to at least do manufacturing 101 if you ever purport to be able to be an authority to that person on what they're going to be doing. There are so many, and going back to this idea of like actually having a book of business when you're teaching people to sell, those paper consultants and stuff, there's nothing wrong with taking people on the journey with you. Mm-hmm. So if you're up front and you say, look, I'm just getting into this. Okay. So you're not getting you're not getting a 20-year veteran. You're getting someone, but come on the path with me. Okay. Some people are going to say, you know what? I want the 20-year veteran, right? Other people are going to be like, you know what? This sounds interesting. Let's learn together and let's figure it out. Right. It doesn't always work with businesses, right? Like especially small businesses have so much that is on their plate because they wear every different hat imaginable, right? Like they need experts. Like they can't go on the journey with one of the experts. They need experts that are just gonna be like, when I call the attorney, I say, what do I do? And they say, do this. Like that's what they need, right? But that comes from this place of self-awareness and authenticity and being just, truthful and living that truth and wearing it on your outside. So much so that when we circle back to that idea of like, a company that tries to sit you in a seat and stuff you into that cookie cutter mold and says, this is who you are now, right? people have, excuse my language, but they have a good bullshit filter nowadays, right?
Mhm.
Like there is Amazon reviews, Google reviews, there are social media will light you up. They will find you, right? Like they will literally find you if you're inauthentic. And if I had one word of caution / advice to anyone who's thinking about anything, this doesn't even just apply to insurance. If you're looking to get into sales or some kind of consultative role or something like that, do you, right? Like when I'm presented with a new producer, I'm asking them, what do you do? When you're not selling, what do you do? Right?
Mhm.
Like I go to tractor pulls. I love football. I host a book club. I volunteer at an entrepreneurship camp or whatever. That's the stuff that's going to be able to create those niches or get you into those niches because you're already living it. It's like just this seamless plug and play kind of thing where it's like, let's teach you the insurance. I don't necessarily need to have to teach you these other things that you're already doing every single day that you're passionate about. And to your point, Precious, that's marrying the passion with the profit, right? Like at that point in time, the profit doesn't even matter anymore. It's like, dude, I do this for free. Like, I don't care. I do it for free now.
Well,
Right?
interesting is the sales piece of it, right? So as a hiring manager, as like you said, agency principals, agency management, we recognize that there's so many different options that exist out there. So as a matter of fact, Tony had a post earlier that I commented on, talking about the total compensation package. What is the what is the proposal to the broker, to the producer that's going to come work for you? And in my environment, just like as an agent, right, we sell the agency, we sell me as an individual professional, and then also the markets that I can get you in front of. As an agency, as a hiring manager, I do a lot of selling still too, right? So I sell them on the idea that they're going to, especially if they're new to the industry, they're going to approach this almost in the mindset of an internship. I want you to come on board. You're going to have the ability to work directly with me. We're going to get you ramped up. We're going to get you all the training that you're going to need in order to really be successful in this role. So in 2021, we've just now started kind of a junior producer role because the mechanics of it, we know how to fill out an app, we know how to send it in, we know how to get the numbers back, but now we've instituted a position where they can see the variety of transactions so that when they're ready, they can move into the actual producer role and close deals themselves. And I partner them with different producers in the agency so that they can kind of get a feel and exposure to the different styles, the different personalities, the different ways that people are successful. Because I want to get them into the mindset of there's no one path to success. I want you to be exposed to this. I want you to figure out how that fits and feels as an individual. And I want to give you, like Meg said, the safe space to hone your craft. You're going to get out there. It's going to be Bambi legs. It's going to be sloppy. It's going to be awkward. Guess what? We all have a first kiss. Get over it. Okay.
Mine was epic, Precious. It was epic. I didn't need any practice. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Oh, I might have knocked her off of the audio feed now. Hopefully I didn't.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I'm laughing so hard, I think I knocked my headset off there. But being able to be vulnerable and say, these are the areas I do really well. These are the areas where I still need some more exposure. So depending on the type of learner you are, maybe you need to watch somebody at bat for a little while. Maybe you need to hear more conversations. That's the difficult part today in remote work, is creating those opportunities to really build off of a team around you. Not impossible, just another challenge.
And let them live the failure with the person that is pushing through the failure.
Mhm.
That's the other thing. Like, Meg, do you see agency owners that deal with new producers with kit gloves and they try and like just kind of like, it's almost like I think I've seen the two extremes. I'm kind of like thinking out loud, but I've seen the two extremes. I've seen the agency owner who's like, look, just throw them in the pool and see if they swim, right? And it's nothing but failure. And then I've seen other ones that it's just like, no, they can't be touched by failure. Just involve them in the successes, and the failures just try and protect them from that. Is that kind of like off base, or do you see that quite often?
No, it's a great question. It's a great observation. There's no sort of standard. It's agency management it's such a personal thing, right? Like every manager is wired differently, they're motivated differently. Our let's call it, well, failure rate would be the negative. The success rate of a producer, and please don't quote me on this, but 1 in 10, 1 in 8, something like that. It's not good. Those people were hired at some point. They can't fail until they've been given the job, the opportunity to fail. Who's largely doing the hiring, especially for small to mid-size agencies, agency sales manager, principals involved in the hiring decision. I think we're missing the mark a lot in terms of who we even invite into the sales conversation. And so when failure becomes likely, it's largely because that person was either not the right fit to begin with or wasn't offered the right tools and support that they needed realistically when they got in the door.
Yeah.
Mentors are great. I'm a huge fan. The problem with mentorship in agencies is that agents are not typically compensated for the mentorship work that they're doing. Most salespeople have a financial motivation. So that if they have 10 minutes in their schedule, they're going to be out hunting rather than mentoring. It's just human nature. So it's not a priority. Further, mentors have usually reached a level of success and not yesterday, 10, 15, 20 years ago. The way insurance was sold 20 years ago is very different than it is today. Much more likely to be a round of golf at the country club than a LinkedIn post. We have tools available to us now as sales professionals that are being completely dismissed by the generation before, who is charged with mentoring the generation coming up. So I say with mentorship, super important. Oh my gosh, that I remember as a green underwriter, the gentleman that shared a cubicle wall with me who had like the bigger oversized cube because he'd been there for a really long time. He knew so much. Like I learned so much from him. However, mentors aren't always right. And they aren't always right for us. And so there's a point when the student, the proverbial student, becomes the teacher. And you get to take all of these little bite-sized soundbite nuggets of information that you've accumulated, and you get to say, thank you, I hear you, I validate you, and now I'm going to go do it my way. And that's the sweet spot, right? That's the 3-year point where you're like, all right, enough consumption. Now it's time for execution. Magic. If you can hang in there, because it's tough, right? It's tough, but that's the goal, right? That's the, you know you're on your way when you feel that you are now stepping into that position. So yeah, mentorship's great, having a really engaged sales leader, and the debate about promoting strong salespeople into sales leadership is a whole different conversation for another day. But making sure that as human beings who've invested in success in a sales career, that we take that advice for what it is. It's not always right, and it's not always right for us, I think is really important.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I want to be respectful of both of your time. I want to say thank you so much. That's a great transition to Meg. I would love to have you back sometime where we can talk about kind of finding that that path that I think is all too often gone down improperly, taking just a high-flying salesperson and turning them into a sales manager. I think is a big missed opportunity, and it's a mistake in a lot of organizations. But again, we could do an entire, hour, maybe a series on that. But I just want to give you 2 seconds really quickly. Again, as a couple of volunteers from the CBCU Society, we do this not necessarily in endorsement of anyone specifically, but you are an independent operator. I would say that anyone who is interested and needs help in terms of their sales force, their sales process, and their sales team, they should at very least check you out. Where can they find out information about you?
Thank you. And thanks again for holding this space. I know it's a labor of love for both of you, and I hear you and I see you. The name of my company is Adjunct Advisors, adjunct like a professor, advisors with an ORS. Thank you so much. There I am. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm creating original, thought-provoking content almost every day on LinkedIn. And spoiler alert, if you're an insurance agent looking to grow your network and your book of business, LinkedIn is a really smart place to be. It's been a huge, huge tool for my own success. So happy to connect with anybody in the industry there and keep the conversation going.
Awesome. And that's adjunctadvisors.com, right?
Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. I want to say thank you. We're going to have you back again sometime, because I think this was amazing. We could go for hours and hours on end after this. Precious, any final thoughts, comments, or kind of brainstorms for future episodes off of what we covered?
No, I mean, I think that this is fantastic. Again, we would be thrilled to have you back on because there's just so much content, and that was really the intent and the design of the show, is to have these sorts of conversations. So we appreciate your time. You're always welcome. Let us know as far as availability. We'll get together on that. And for you guys listening, more to come. So there's a little bit of a teaser out there that this conversation is far from over. No, but other than that, this is Christmas week. So, happy holidays to everyone who's listening and following. Keep sharing this, and, we'll keep, having these conversations and learning and growing together.
Yep. Well, again, thank you everyone who tuned in, or if you end up watching the recorded version of this. We come at you every Wednesday. We're probably going to take a little break in between the two holidays, just to catch our breath and maybe do a little self-care, have a couple of mimosas or something in order. I'm due at least a couple. But yes, so we come at you every Wednesday at 3:00, and we thank you that you're coming on this journey with us. And so we will see you in probably 2 weeks. Keep an eye out. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.